She fined me $1,000 for swimming in my own lake. That's when I stopped playing defense and turned the tables. You should have seen her face when I revealed the expired HOA easement and slapped a $5,000 lease fee on the table. The same clipboard she used to rule the neighborhood? It couldn't save her now. This is how I took down the Queen of Petty, legally, publicly, and gloriously. The boardroom fell silent as I clicked to the final slide of my presentation. The new budget numbers glowed on the screen, and I watched Karen's face transform from smug confidence to pure horror. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the conference table as she processed the $5,000 increase in HOA fees, staring back at her. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice climbing octaves with each word. "Who authorized this outrageous increase? This is completely unacceptable." I adjusted my tie, savoring the moment I'd been planning for weeks. "You did, Karen," I said with a calm smile. "The moment you fined me $1,000 for swimming in my own lake." Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is David, and I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 15 years. When I bought my property, the main selling point wasn't the 4-bedroom colonial or the 3-car garage. It was the pristine 20-acre lake that came with the deed. Crystal Lake, as the original owners named it, sits partially on my property and partially borders the HOA community. For over a decade, this arrangement worked perfectly. Neighbors would wave as I took my morning swims, and occasionally I'd even let the HOA host their summer picnic on my section of the shoreline. Then Karen became HOA president. You know the type. She showed up to her first board meeting with a leather-bound notebook, color-coded tabs, and a mission to bring order to the chaos within her kingdom. Within her first month, she'd issued 17 warning letters for infractions ranging from mailboxes being 2 inches too tall to grass being half an inch too long. She measured everything with an actual ruler she carried in her purse. The trouble started on a beautiful Saturday morning in June. I was doing my usual swim, floating on my back and watching clouds drift by, when I heard that unmistakable shriek from the shore. Excuse me, sir." Karen stood at the water's edge in her HOA president blazer, despite the 90-degree heat, waving a clipboard like a battle flag. "You need to exit the water immediately." I swam closer, though not too close. Something told me she might try to citizen's arrest me with that clipboard. "Good morning, Karen. Beautiful day for a swim?" "Swimming is strictly prohibited in community bodies of water," she announced, reading from her clipboard. HOA Regulation 7.3.9 clearly states that all recreational water activities require board approval and proper insurance documentation. I treaded water, genuinely confused. "This is my lake, Karen. I own it. Check the property records." She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, the kind that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," from a mile away. "The HOA governs all shared natural spaces within our community boundaries. This lake borders HOA property. Therefore, it falls under our jurisdiction." "That's not how property law works," I said, starting to swim back to my dock. "We'll see what our lawyers have to say about that," she called after me. "Consider yourself on notice." I figured that would be the end of it. Surely once she actually looked at the plat map, she'd realize that only one tiny corner of the lake was on HOA property. Nonsense.
Property lines and deed restrictions, she'd realize her mistake. But I underestimated both her determination and her ability to twist reality to fit her narrative. The certified letter arrived the following Monday. Official HOA letterhead, naturally. It detailed my blatant violation of community standards and assessed a $1,000 fine for unauthorized use of community resources. The letter went on for 3 pages, citing made-up regulations and threatening legal action if I continued my reckless endangerment of community safety. I tried the reasonable approach first. I made copies of my deed, highlighting the sections that clearly showed my ownership of the lake. I included the original survey from 1952, the water rights documentation, and even a letter from the previous HOA president acknowledging my private ownership. I hand-delivered it all to Karen's house. She answered the door in another blazer, this one pink, as if she had a whole closet dedicated to HOA authority wear. "David," she said, not even looking at my documents, "the fine stands. The board has spoken." "The board?" I asked. "When did the board meet about this?" "Emergency session," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We take safety violations very seriously." I later learned this emergency session consisted of Karen and her two closest allies meeting at Starbucks. The letters kept coming. She sent one nearly every day, each more threatening than the last. She filed complaints with the city, claiming I was creating an attractive nuisance. She started a whisper campaign among the neighbors, telling anyone who would listen that I was setting a dangerous precedent. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down actually asked if it was true that I was planning to open an unlicensed water park. That's when I decided to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I spent the next 2 weeks buried in HOA documents, bylaws, contracts, agreements going back 30 years. And that's when I found it. The smoking gun. An easement agreement from 1998 that allowed the HOA to use a portion of my property for maintenance access to their section of the lake. The agreement included rights to the small beach area where they held community events and the gravel road their maintenance trucks used. The kicker, the agreement expired after 25 years unless formally renewed. It was now 2024. Nobody had remembered to renew it. I verified everything with my lawyer, who actually laughed when I explained the situation. "So she's fining you for using your own property while her organization is technically trespassing on it," he said. "This is going to be fun." I waited until the next HOA board meeting to drop the bomb. These meetings were Karen's pride and joy. She ran them like congressional hearings, complete with a gavel she bought on Amazon and strict Robert's Rules of Order. I signed up for the public comment period and waited my turn. When she finally called my name, her tone dripping with disdain, I stood up with my own leather folder. Two could play the official documentation game. "Thank you, Madam President," I began, matching her formal tone. "I'm here to discuss the expiration of the easement agreement between the HOA and my property." The room went quiet. Karen's gavel hand twitched. "As you may or may not be aware," I continued, pulling out copies for each board member, "the HOA's legal access to the northern section of Crystal Lake, including the beach area and maintenance road, expired 6 months ago. I've been tolerant of the continued trespassing, but given recent events, I feel it's time to formalize a new arrangement." Karen's face had gone from red to white to a shade of purple I didn't know was possible for human skin. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "We've used that access for decades without legal authorization." "For the past 6 months," I clarified. "My attorney has drawn up a new lease agreement. The terms are quite reasonable. The HOA can maintain access for the low annual fee of," I paused for effect, $5,000. The gasp from the audience was audible. Someone's coffee cup actually clattered to the floor. $5,000? Karen shrieked, forgetting all about her precious Robert's Rules of Order. "That's market rate for lakefront access," I replied calmly. "I had 3 commercial real estate agents provide comps. If anything, I'm giving you a discount. Of course, you're welcome to decline and lose access entirely. I'm sure the community would understand losing their beach area and having to drive an extra 4 miles around the lake for maintenance. The board members started whispering frantically among themselves. Tom Bradley, the treasurer, was already pulling up budget spreadsheets on his laptop. Karen looked like she was about to have a stroke. "You can't do this," she hissed. "Actually, I can," I said, sliding the lease agreement across the table. "You have 30 days to decide. After that, I'll be installing a gate." The next 3 weeks were glorious chaos. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The same people who'd been avoiding me after Karen's gossip campaign suddenly had very strong opinions about fiscal responsibility and board overreach. The Facebook group exploded with demands for emergency budget meetings and calls for accountability. Karen tried everything. She sent one cease and desist letters that her lawyer probably charged her a fortune for, only to be told they had no legal standing. She tried to claim historical use rights, but couldn't provide the necessary documentation. She even tried to get the city involved, but they wisely stayed out of a civil property dispute. Finally, with 2 days left before my deadline and facing a full-scale resident revolt, the board called an emergency meeting. A real one this time, not a Starbucks coffee clutch.
Community center was packed. People were standing in the aisles. Someone had even set up a live stream for residents who couldn't attend. Karen sat at the head table, her usual blazer replaced with a severe black suit that made her look like she was attending her own funeral, which, professionally speaking, she was. The vote was swift and unanimous, with one abstention. Karen, of course, voted against it, but she was outnumbered 4-1. The lease was approved, the budget was adjusted, and everyone's HOA fees went up to cover the new expense. The aftermath was even better than the victory. The same keyboard warriors who had supported Karen's every petty rule now turned their fury on her. The Facebook group featured detailed breakdowns of how her vendetta had cost every household an extra $160 per year. Someone created a meme of her face on the Titanic with the caption, "I'll never let go of my clipboard." During public comment at the next meeting, resident after resident stood up to express their disappointment in the board's leadership. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher who hadn't spoken at a meeting in 10 years, gave a particularly devastating speech about fiscal responsibility and the dangers of unchecked power. She ended with, "Perhaps some board members should consider whether they're truly serving the community's best interests." The recall petition started circulating that night. Within a week, it had more than enough signatures to trigger a special election. Karen tried to rally her supporters, but it turns out that hiking everyone's fees because of a personal grudge is a pretty effective way to lose allies. I made sure to time my next swim for the morning of the recall vote. As I floated on my back, I could see Karen's car in the community center parking lot. She'd arrived at 6 in the morning to campaign, setting up a table with cookies and flyers defending her record. By noon, the cookies were untouched, and she was standing alone. The results were announced that evening. Karen was removed from the board by a margin of 87%, the highest percentage in HOA history, I was told. As the results were read, she stood up, clutching her leather notebook to her chest like armor. "This is a mistake," she announced to the room, her voice cracking. "I was only trying to maintain standards. You'll regret this when property values plummet." Someone in the back actually laughed, and Karen's face crumbled. She grabbed her giant purse and her measuring ruler and stormed out, her heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown to her exile. The new board sent me a formal apology letter the following week, along with a check refunding my $1,000 fine plus interest. They proposed a renegotiated lease at a much more modest $500 per year, with the promise of mutual respect and cooperation going forward. I accepted immediately. I celebrated by installing a new sign at the entrance to my section of the lake. In large, friendly letters, it read, "Private property, swim free." And below that, in much smaller print that you had to get close to read, "HOA leadership not welcome." The last I heard, Karen had listed her house for sale. The real estate agent mentioned something about her taking a job 3 counties over where presumably no one had heard of the Crystal Lake incident.
I like to think there's an HOA board somewhere that has no idea what's about to hit them. As for me, I swim every morning. Sometimes I float on my back and think about that day in the boardroom when I presented that $5,000 increase. The look on Karen's face was worth every penny of legal fees and research time. She learned the hard way that sometimes the smallest power can corrupt absolutely, and that swimming in your own lake isn't a crime, no matter what your clipboard says.
Karen lost the vote, lost the board seat, and soon she lost the whole neighborhood. As for me, I swim every morning in peace. No fines, no clipboard rulers, just quiet ripples and freedom. I still keep the sign at my dock: private property, swim free. HOA leadership not welcome. So tell me, what would you have done if someone fined you for swimming on your own land? Drop your thoughts below, hit like, subscribe, and share with someone who's ever tangled with a Karen. I'll see you in the next story. Same lake, new drama.